Happy Sunday morning, everyone. Thank you for listening in. And yeah, let's get going here with today's podcast. It's looks like a bit of an overcast today, but it's supposedly kind of hot. This actually might work out perfect though. I've been trying to see if I can get my daughters into camping. And so what I did was well my oldest daughter, she was wanting to do some camping and all, but I think she had more in mind like indoor camping. But I did buy a tent. It's not a huge tent, but it's enough where it can fit 4 people in it. But it's too big to be inside. But I figured maybe we could do a little bit of backyard camping. I got them like these little sleeping bags and all, and plan to maybe go get some snacks, maybe some stuff to make some s'mores and see if they'd be up to doing some backyard camping. My thought is that they might just want to be out there for a little bit and then want to come back inside. I don't think they'll want to stay the night overnight. But it'd be the perfect day to try it out, though, as tomorrow is Labor Day, and so we have the day off. So that'll be a fun little experiment to see if they'll enjoy it to some extent, anyways. But if not, either way, it'll be fun. Um, but yeah, so wanted to get this going here actually because as I was taking my notes down on, so this might be a bit of a lengthier episode, and because as I was taking my notes down, so this is for 1983 that we're getting into. It's where the video game crash happened. So there was a lot of notes that I took down on this as I'm trying to provide as much insight on it as possible. But then also had a pretty good week as far as like video games goes. All things considered, because I know there's a lot of controversy out there with some stuff that came out this past week, but there's still I'm going to try to put as much positive perspective on it as possible. But I will touch a little bit of base on what's going on because it's just one of those things that's going on in the video game industry now that is it's not putting me off the hobby. I mean, I love gaming. It's something that I will probably always do. It's just that there's just certain business practices and all that as far as like continuously to get like the latest and greatest and all. I'm kind of starting to steer away from, unless it's like a certain game and all, right. I guess when I say that, it's kind of more towards the AAA gaming scene, because there's a lot of cool indie stuff happening, which I will get into, which I'm actually kind of really excited about to talk about. But getting into, though, before all that though, is touching base here on the games from last week from the Roulette of Gaming. So, bit of a confession. I had a goal to try to beat Donkey Kong Country. I didn't. And basically, I think I played like one more level, and I've been slowly progressing through the game. But it was just because a lot of other cool stuff ended up happening this week with video game, that it just kind of steered my attention away from that. But I will beat you Donkey Kong Country one of these days, and then eventually that'll lead me to Donkey Kong Country 2, which I heard is the greatest one in that trilogy. So, but one day I will beat it. But yeah, so touching base on those games. So again, Donkey Kong Country, I played a level. It was like a Poison Lake, I think it was called. Um, the special effects on it were pretty cool as you're underwater, and it has kind of like a green, excuse me, kind of like this green sort of like poison cloud, and the transparencies and all that, which the Super Nintendo could do pretty good. Was pretty impressive. And yeah, I mean, I love the game and all. It's just sometimes I just play like in spurts when I get a quick moment to. Usually, my gaming style is this, right? As a just someone that I just don't have the time to game as much as I used to. Is if I'm like hanging around with my family and all, sometimes I'll bust out like the Switch and play a game, and maybe play like one level or so as we're watching a show or so. And just my daughters right now are very young, and so they need a lot of attention, and so and I don't want to just be that guy that's just playing games, and all, and not paying attention to my family. I'm not about that. But every now and then, if everything's fairly quiet, and I'll try to play like a level or two. So yes, I do use save states a lot, and so on the Nintendo Switch Online, you have a quick way of saving your game, which I actually like playing like Super Nintendo games on there and all. So that's the one thing I do like about the Nintendo Switch Online, is just that you can rewind and save states and all that. Because again, sometimes I'm playing a game, and it's like, oh crap, I gotta save it. And the games back then, Donkey Kong Country has some save files that you can utilize on it, but it's not always accessible. You have to get to like a certain point in the map on it. So yeah, I'll definitely use save states on it. And then for like the games that I want to really get into, like that's more involving and all, or even if it is an old school game that I really want to get into and focus on, all those games are typically the ones that I'll play like at night where everyone's asleep and all, and then I'll just try to get some game time in where on something like that I want to be more immersed in. But anyway, that's kind of what Donkey Kong Country got relegated to, and so like I was only able to play one level, and then like I said, my main gaming time I was using for some other stuff. But Sin and Punisher Star Successor, so I didn't get to play it again this week because I have to bust out the Wii U that I have stored right now, and I wasn't able to get around to that. And but still, I mean, it's a great game. I really enjoy it. I have a way to play it actually because I have it emulated on my Xbox Series S. It's kind of odd way to sound, or how I'd have access to that game. But I don't have the Wiimote, and so I don't think it'll play very well with just a controller. Maybe I can play around with it just to see if it is playable, but I don't think it will be because the cursor, it's very sensitive to movement, and because it was based off of using the Wiimote, and I don't think the analog stick that I have the Wiimote sensor map to, I don't think it'll be. Yeah, I don't think it'll work quite as well for that, but maybe I'll give it a shot just to kind of see if it's somewhat playable. And Gran Turismo 7, so I didn't get to play it again this week, but yeah, I mean, it's still a game that I definitely want to continue playing, because I just love using the racing wheel on it, and so sometimes I'll just bust it out and out in the living room and go a few rounds or a few laps, and yeah, it's just fun to play that way. But all right, but for this week though, so I'm thinking what I'm gonna do. I'll see how this goes. I'm trying, with my little thing that I'm trying to do here with video game related. I'm trying to do this podcast, but then also maybe something with YouTube on the side. I don't know how I'm going about it. Right now, I'm just mainly doing it for fun, but the games that I'm going to talk about now, and I think I started thinking about this because again, I didn't really get to play these games this week. Is I think what I'm going to try to do is so I'm going to talk about the games now, whatever games I end up selecting here, and then some night throughout the week, maybe on a Sunday night, we'll see. Well, probably not tonight, but maybe tomorrow. I don't know. Sometime during the week, I'm going to play the games, like on and place it. I'll put it on my little YouTube channel that I started. Right now, I have it. I just kind of created it for fun. I don't really know where I'm going with it, but I called it Arcade Amigo. And so I've just been placing some videos on there, just random stuff. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play these games on there. I guess sort of stream them. I'm not really set up to stream the way in the normal sense. Usually what I do, I just have a camera pointed at the TV. I haven't really looked up on how to stream it. I don't think I have the equipment all for that. But just so I can have some like an actual visual representation, right, of playing these games, because a lot of this what I'm doing and all is also for archiving purposes, right? So it's not just I just don't want to talk about them. I want to also have like some kind of a video of it, and so I think that's what I might do is, and then maybe play the games for not to get completely into them and all. Some of them I might add to my overall rotation of games that I'm actually playing, but just to give them like I don't know, maybe like 30 minutes or so, and just for people to get an idea what the games are all about, and all, if you've never played them before, or just have a discussion around them, right? And offer, even if it's a game that you've played before. So that's what I'm thinking I'm going to do. And as I'm playing the game, I'll just have some commentary, right? And all if I'm just discussing them. But we'll see how that goes. That's kind of my hope. But if I wanted to, because I'm thinking maybe 30 minutes, I think would be somewhat fair to give him. So I'm obviously not going to be beating a lot of games there. It's just to give it like a first impression and all. But that is an hour and a half. So we'll see. We'll see. That's maybe that might be a little overly ambitious for me, but we'll see. Okay, so let's get on here then with the relay of gaming. I've added a few games now, so I'm up to 1,272. So, okay, here we go. Let's see here. Oh, wrong app. All right, first one is 831. So that brings up Ah, sweet. RoboCop Rogue City. All right, I've actually have been wanting to play this game. I got it. What was it, last year? And I played a little bit of it. Looked really cool. And so there's actually been some really good like movie game tie-ins and all. But anyway, I'll get into that a little bit later. But all right, sweet. Let's see. So going with the next one. 753. Let's see. What would we got here? Oh, Pikmin 4. Okay. Okay, and the last one here. 424. And we got Golden Sun, The Lost Age. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. So, interesting. So these are games that I'm not too familiar with, but that's okay. So starting with RoboCop Rogue City. So yeah, this game came out in 2024. It was last year, right? And so I've already talked about before, right? I'm an 80s kid. I love 80s movies. And things like Terminator, Aliens, and definitely RoboCop. I love the first two movies. They're great. Violent as hell, but they're awesome. And so when this game came out and they were talking pretty good about it, I immediately got pretty excited, right? And all because again, I'm a big RoboCop fan, and I like how I think they brought back what's his name, Peter Weller, I believe, as the actor. So the same actor that played RoboCop back in the day. And the story, because they've been doing this a handful of times now, and to pretty good success, where they've made like a game based off of a movie series from, and in some cases from back in the day, where it's almost like the next sequel that would have been in the story, right? So almost like the next movie, only just made it in a video game. So this is like, because I want to say, I think that they said that this game takes place between parts one and two or something like that. And it has very much the same style, the same feel of specifically the first two movies. And so I played like about a level into it, and I was really liking it. I was like, okay, this is cool. Sometimes what I'll do, like if it's a game that I get in on, I really like it. But if I'm kind of in the middle of playing another game, I'll just test it out for like a level or so, just to make sure if it's something that I'm gonna like. And this is definitely one that I really enjoyed. And it's kind of up on my towards the top of my list on my backlog that I've been wanting to play. So this might give me the push here to really start playing it. So cool. Kind of excited about that one actually. Um, I mean, it very much has like the style of the violence, just the overall 80s aesthetics and all, which again I'm a big fan of. And also too, let's see, I'm trying to double check something here, but I want to say, let's see, just to kind of let's see, Terminator. Who developed Terminator? Is this? Oh no, I could be wrong. My first thought was that. So I was. I don't want to talk about this game too much, just because in case it comes up later to play. But Terminator Resistance. So this game came out in, let's see, this would have been about 2019 or so, and it was kind of the same thing. It was a Terminator game that it's almost like you can say like it's a sequel to the older movies, and really I thought it was really well done. I mean, it was a game that was not the most liked by the critics, but I think a lot of fans really enjoyed it. And I just love the way that it just, continues on the overall story of Terminator. And I thought it was from the same developer, but maybe it's not. I can't quite, at a quick glance, I'm not quite sure. But either way, kind of the same thing though with RoboCop. So as far as, it continuing on the movie storylines. So yeah, pretty excited about that. And let's see. All right, so Pikmin 4. With Pikmin 4, I played the first Pikmin game actually fairly recently through emulation. I was just kind of testing out some GameCube games that I've emulated, and so I played that. And I played the first little mission of it, and actually it was pretty fun. Pikmin games is something that I had a curiosity to, but nothing really that I was seeking out to play. But like I said, right, I was emulating a bunch of GameCube games, and that was one that I tested out, and it's pretty fun. It's a fun puzzle game for sure, and I don't have much experience though with the other ones. And so part four, I believe that's the one that came out more recently on the Switch, right? A couple of years ago or so, or maybe it's been a little bit longer than that. But so this one here, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to play that one, just because again I don't own it and it's a Nintendo game, so I highly doubt it's gonna be for cheap right now. So maybe in place of it, I might play part one since I do have access to that one. So we'll see. But yeah, I think maybe that's what I'll do. So I guess backing up a little bit on some of these, I may cheat a little bit as far as like the actual selection I get and what I'm gonna try to play. Again, just because depending on what I have access to and all. Or in the case of the second one, so I got Golden Sun: The Lost Age, but I'm gonna do the Golden Sun one because it's it because my understanding of the series, I've never played them before, but my understanding is that they part two picks right up where part one left off, I think, or like they're pretty much close together. Uh, so I don't want to go into part two without playing part one. So I think I'm going to cheat a little bit on this one instead of Golden Age or Golden Sun: The Lost Age. I'm going to do Golden Sun. Um, right? I think because I'm pretty sure that's the case, right? Let's see. I'll double check it. If not, if for some reason they are completely separate games, then I'll play Golden Sun: The Lost Age then. But I want to say I think that's the case. But yeah, again, another game that I don't have a whole lot of input on, and it's a game that's kind of would be my jam, right? I mean, it's a JRPG. It's developed by Camelot, I believe. I believe they were still doing this. I could be wrong, but I know it's the people behind like the Shining Force games, right? And Shining the Holy Ark and all that. Because I know they started doing like Nintendo sports games, but I could be wrong on that. I'm pretty sure they're the developers or somehow tied to the people that were behind the Shining Force games. And yeah, I mean, it looks great. It's something that I've always been interested in playing. It's just I never had I had the game at Boy Advance back in the day, but I never really explored the library of that too much. I mainly just got it for the Metroid games on it. And so this will be exciting to check this out. So I can play this one pretty easily. I have a few different ways I can play that one. So yeah, so cool. Those are some games that are exciting to talk about or play since I've never really played them before. So we'll see how it goes as far as my little plan, right, on playing some of these games to give them some time. Alrighty. So let's see. What has been going on this week then with video games? So, two cool stories as far as like modern gaming stuff that I thought this is kind of more news related things. And because there was some controversy with some things that happened this week, and I'll touch base on those here in a bit. But two cool stories though that I read about, and one of them is so Helldivers 2 came out on the Xbox. And so I know there's been I mean, it seems like a game that would be cross-platform anyways. I was surprised that it was only a PlayStation game, but I guess I'm not sure who developed it and all that. But I know there's been a lot of back and forth about exclusivity and all that, right? But for what it is, I did read this cool story though about how a lot of people that were getting on from Xbox players that were logging in to play, that there was like a little old veterans from the PS gamers that were just helping people out get set up, get started, and all. And I'm assuming this is all happening like in the online lobbies and such, something to that effect. And I just thought that was cool, right? And all that. I think a lot of times gaming communities and all get the reputation for being very toxic, which admittedly they can be for sure, right? But there's also a lot of cool stuff that happens like this. And when I hear stuff like this and all, right, it's almost like a brotherhood forming and all, and and not just males, right, and all. I'm sure there's a lot of females out there that are playing as well too, and ultimately we just kind of see ourselves as gamers and gamers helping out other gamers, and I think that's really cool. And because again, so much times you hear just a lot of toxicity, right, in the gaming industry. So I thought that was kind of a cool story. Um, and so way to get along, guys and gals. Let's see. And the other one too also is so Hollow Knight is a big deal, right? I think I talked about it last time. My experience was Hollow Knight, which I'm actually going to add to here in a bit. But it's a big deal. I mean, Hollow Knight is really a big deal. People just absolutely love the first game, and so the anticipation for Silk Song has been through the roof. I saw something that the player count on Steam for Hollow Knight, the original one, just really ballooned up, right? I think it's the highest it's ever been or something like that. I read, I'm not sure, but I think people are just really anticipating Silk Song, which comes out what, next Thursday, I believe. And so I saw something that I don't know, I don't think it's been officially confirmed, but I have a lot of people were talking about it though, that it's going to come out for $20. If that's the case, I mean that's a really big deal, and I think it's just another push that certain developers are doing to try to get the industry to basically look at just the overall pricing of video games and going beyond that, right? Just the way games are developed and all that, the budgets of these games and all, to try to scale things back a bit, I think a lot of it, I mean, that the price point, of some games that have been coming out this year, like, Clear Obscure Oblivion for $50, the Elder Scrolls Remastered for $50, Silksong, if it comes out at $20, I mean, that's going to be insane. I think was it the Mafia Old Country? I think that came out also for fairly cheap. I know there was another big release. I don't quite recall if it was the Mafia Old Country, but it sounds like there's some developers and all right that are, whether if they're able to price it that way or if they're able to, to try to send a message. I don't know, right? But either way, though, I think that's kind of cool though. So that was pretty cool here. Um, but yeah, so ended up playing some games this week, some new stuff. And well, I should say not all of it new, but just basic games that I've either had already access to, or that I bought some while ago, but finally got into it and all. And one of the things that I really kind of have been thinking about a lot is just a lot of the cool 2D stuff that is coming out. Because there were some 2D games and all that I played this week that I thought were pretty cool. But just to touch base a bit on this is, so there was Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, which I'm still going through and having a fun time with that game. And then I also ended up getting Shinobi Art of Vengeance, which I am loving. I think that's an amazing game so far. I got a little ways into it and just loving it. The second stage where, so Shinobi games, well, the some of the Shinobi games have like a kind of like a section where you're writing something. Well, I guess more specifically Shinobi 3. But this one kind of pays homage to that, where you're riding on a dog that I guess you can say is kind of reminiscent of like your dog in Shadow Dancer. And you're going through like this field and you have these ninjas attacking you. And then in the background, there's this huge demon that eventually starts shooting like these lasers towards you, and it's just the music, the action, and everything. I was just so blown away that it's like this is kind of like the way it was back then, only more modernized. And I was geeking out to the extreme. And I'm really digging this game, and really excited to continue playing it. But then it's also a lot of like the other 2D stuff that is coming out. We have Neon Inferno, I think is what it's called. It seems like it's kind of like a shooter, like a running gun, but also kind of reminiscent of like Wild Guns, where you can shoot like towards the background, and has a very almost cyberpunk anime aesthetic, where the main character, or one of the main characters, looks like Jin Kazama. But that game looks really fun. I think it comes out in October-ish or so. But yeah, excited about that one. And then the one that I'm really looking forward to and all is Terminator 2 No Fate. Again, Terminator 2 is one of my favorite movies of all time, and now that we're getting a game based on that movie, I'm really excited for that one. And another game too, also, it looks like it got delayed until next year, I think I saw, but it's another cyberpunk game. It's called Replaced, and it has like this pixel art but kind of 3D, also almost like an HD 2D kind of look. I don't know how exactly they're doing it, but the game looks absolutely gorgeous. I'm all about the cyberpunk stuff and all, setting, and that's another game that I really am looking forward to. And then the Marvel Cosmic Invasion beat 'em up game that's coming out. Yeah, that looks great. I think it comes out later this year. And He-Man, again, I already talked about it last time, but I think it says coming soon, so I don't know when it's coming out. But yeah, another one I'm really excited about. And then Hollow Knight Silk Song. So this week, another game that I was taking up some of my gameplay time was Hollow Knight. I had tried to play it before. I think I talked about it before, and I wasn't able to really get into it too much. But I finally took some time to play Hollow Knight. I was watching some reviews on it, and I was like, okay, what is this game all about, and all, and so because I had played it already, like I said, right, I had played it for maybe about an hour before, and all, and just really couldn't, I don't know, I wasn't just quite jiving with everything, but this time I was like, let's give this some like honest playthrough. And yeah, I'm starting to get. I think I'm getting the whole point of it. What was throwing me off at first was the map, right? And sometimes when I play games and all, I'm like I'm tired, or I have my kids with me, and also I'm not like completely immersed in what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I think that was the case when I first played Hollow Knight, is where I wasn't quite understanding, right, because it's like, okay, I have my map, but it doesn't really show me where I'm at. I don't know where to go and all. Well, I looked up a few things, right? Like, I saw this video that said, like, tips for beginners, and that you can buy a compass, I think, where basically it shows you where you're at on the map, and then also some other items where it'll show you where certain things are located at. And once I got that, then I was like, oh, okay. So then it kind of started making more sense to me and all, as far as how to traverse through the game. And I ended up beating one of the early. I don't know if he's a mini boss or a boss, but he was a pretty big fella. Where he's like in an armor, and he has a mace, and he's trying to slam you with it. And then when you hit him enough times, his almost like baby face thing comes out of his helmet. Well, I ended up beating that boss. It wasn't too super difficult, but after I beat it, I was telling my daughter, I was like, "Oh, I just beat a Hollow Knight boss." I was like, "I think that's kind of a big, it's an early boss, so I know I understand that some of the later bosses are probably gonna kick my ass, but I was, it was my first little like thrill of the game right and over. I'm like, okay, I kind of see what this game's all about. So I'm actually getting hooked on it, and so excited to continue playing it. And so I know it's going to be a really hard game, and it doesn't seem like it's too friendly with the saves, like the save benches that are around. So that one might take me a while, but we'll see what Silk Song is all about, and I see if I want to try to beat Hollow Knight before I play Silk Song, or maybe if I'll just jump into Silk Song when it comes out. But we'll see, especially if it's at $20. But yeah, but another 2D game though, right? The Hollow Knight and then Hollow Knight Silk Song were amazing games. Well, I'm sure Silk Song will be amazing. And so, again, just another awesome game to throw into this pantheon of just awesome 2D games that have been coming out. And in another one too, also. And so this one kind of came out of nowhere for me as far as me playing it. I had known about the game before and all. That's Unicorn Overlord. And so this game came out last year, I believe, in 2024, I believe. And it caught my interest right away because I love Vanillaware's art style. I think they just have a gorgeous 2D anime art. It looks really stunning in a lot of their games. So going back to Princess Crown on the Sega Saturn, and then Odin Sphere, Dragon's Crown. I mean, these games just look gorgeous, and I really love playing them just for the art style, really. But the games have been pretty decent too. So then when they came out with this game, and I was like, oh, this is like a strategy RPG. It had my interest, and then it was getting really great reviews. So I was like, oh, okay. And so it's one that I've been like tempted to buy, but I'm like, oh, it's like because it was always like for $60. I was like, dang, I was like, I just don't want to spend the money on that and all. And I mainly wanted that game on the Switch, because again, some of those games just the portability factor, and if it's a decent enough port on the Switch, I'll generally try to go for that, or on the Steam Deck and all, right. So I have the access for hybrid playing, or just a game that I just don't mind playing most of the time portably, which is, for example, a game like this. Well, I was going through the games that were released on the PS Plus, because I have the membership for that. And so as I was going through those, like, oh wait, I was like, they have Unicorn Overlord on here, and I don't know if it got recently added or not, or I just hadn't paid attention. So I downloaded it right away, and I checked out like the first little battle that you can do on it. And I was immediately in love with this game. Again, the graphics on this are just so amazing. They're just I love the 2D art to it, and the gameplay and all was pretty fun and all. I like strategy RPGs. It's just that sometimes I get a little overwhelmed with all the complex systems. And I kind of talked about this last time, where if it's a game that has like a lot of complex systems and all that, but if it's something that interests me, I will want to take the time to learn it. And this is a perfect example of that. Because I was going through the game, and again, I haven't played a strategy RPG, at least one that's more involving than say like something like Shining Force. And I was like, okay, there's a kind of a lot going on here. I was like, but I'm gonna take the time to learn it. Well, I beat the first chapter, or the first story segment or stage or whatever, in the PS5 one, or the one that I downloaded on the PS5. But I liked it so much that I was like, okay, this is something that I kind of want portably though, because again, with the PlayStation Port, I've been having issues with my internet around here at the house, and it's not the best experience for me. So out of curiosity, I was like, well, let me see. I was like, what is it going for on the Switch? And it was actually on sale for like 23.99, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy it. I was like, I love this game. I was really loving it so far. I was like, I want this, and so was able to play a little ways into it. I beat like the first two stages now on there, and yeah, this game it's really cool. It has me hooked, and yeah, it's just I mean, the story seems pretty cool. It seems evolving enough, but the animations and everything to all the just look really stunning, and the gameplay too. It's what I like about a strategy RPG is where it's simple enough for me to get going on it, and then it becomes more complex as far as like how you're strategizing the placement of your battalion or whatever, and and how you can customize your character, but give me like a simple ease me into it, and then you can hook me that way. And that's what this one is doing, because like the first two battles that I've played, I mean, it very clearly explains what you should be doing and all that, and so I'm like, okay, so I'm following along. And again, I'm getting a bit older, so some of this stuff doesn't like really click with me, especially when you got tons of other stuff going on in your head. And so I do like how this one it kind of eases you into it, to not make it so intimidating. And it's kind of reminding me a lot of the Dragon Force game from the Sega Saturn. That's another game I really want to get into, but it was one of those games where I remember I tried it one night. I was like, and it was kind of the same thing, right? I was kind of tired. I wasn't really completely focused into really giving it a good shot. I just figured it'd be something I can kind of get into and jump in and play. But then you're kind of bombarded with all these menus and all that, and I was like, okay. And so I got kind of lost on it. But it kind of reminded me of that for some reason, though. And that's another game that I do want to give an honest effort to at some point later. But yeah, Unicorn Overlord, really liked it. Great music, great gameplay, amazing graphics, and it looks really nice on the Switch too. Also, as far as I can see, I mean, outside of like resolution and all, I couldn't really see a difference between the what I played on the PS. Well, it's the PS4 version that I downloaded, but on the PS5, and I was playing the Switch version on my Switch OLED, and looks really nice. So yeah, just from what I can tell, if you haven't gotten the game at all and you want it on the Switch, it from what I can tell, it's pretty much identical. But yeah, that was Unicorn Overlord, just awesome. But then getting into more, I guess, AAA-ish games. Well, I guess Unicorn Overlord can be kind of a AAA game, but so a few things did happen this week with a game that I played for the first time, but I'd had this in my library, but I hadn't played it yet. But I got around to playing it this week, and that was Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2. And it was a game that didn't interest me when it came out in 2023, because I was like, oh, it seems kind of like a Gears of War-ish kind of, and I don't know much about Warhammer. I just know that, um, there's a big fandom for it out there. I know the actor Henry Cavill has really raved about it and all. So I mean, it's something that I was like, okay, cool. I mean, I can always appreciate, when someone's really, that has its fandom and all that, even if it's not something that I know much about, or but I was like, well, I've had this in my library. I'm just gonna check it out. And holy crap, this game is awesome. The I mean, it's kind of like Gears of War the way it plays, but I don't think it has like a cover mechanic though. At least I don't know. There was so many damn like of those alien creatures that were coming after me and all. I didn't even bother to try. But yeah, just a really fun game. Looks amazing. I have it on the Xbox Series X. and I'm loving it. I played like through the first level of it, and I'm like, okay, I I like this game. This game is cool. I was like, why have I not tried this game already? Because sometimes, like I said, I'll buy games and I just have them in my backlog to play. But yeah, definitely like this game. And oh, I remember now the reason why I played it. But yeah, but I love that game. But the reason I played it though was because another game that came out this week or this past week was Gears of War Reloaded. Now it's on the I have Game Pass, so I was able to download it on there, and so I booted that up, and I mean it's cool. It's Gears of War, and that's cool. I love the Gears of War game, and there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the port or anything. I mean, it cleans up the what the game was, basically the Ultimate Edition that came out in 2015, I believe. But there's just not much more to it other than that, though. Well, aside from the fact that now it's on the PS5, which is great. I mean, as far as that goes, but I mean, it really is kind of the same game. And again, I love Gears of War and all that, but I guess I was just kind of missing like trying to experience a new Gears of War game. And I know we're getting E-Days maybe next year or so, but I was kind of put off by Gears of War 4 and Gears 5. And so when I was thinking about that, I was like, well, there's this Space Marine 2 game, the Warhammer game. I was like, that I've had in my library because I bought it like shortly after the game came out back in almost 2 years ago. And so that's why it prompted me to play. I was like, well, let's see what this game's all about. And I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty kick ass. And yeah, this definitely excited to keep trying that game there. And the other one, as far as for like a more newish game, big budget game, is Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. And so that's a game that I've probably been playing the most this week. Well, that and Shinobi and Unicorn Overlord. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid Delta. So I mean I bought the game because Metal Gear Solid 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. It's not quite my favorite Metal Gear Solid game, but but Metal Gear Part 1 and 2 or Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 or I'm sorry. Oh my god. Metal Gear Solid 1 and 3 are my two favorite Metal Gear Solid games, and they're pretty high up there, my all-time favorite games of all time. So uh, you know, so I've been playing it, and I got up to the point where I'm right before I'm about to find the end. So I put some time into this game this past week, and I'm enjoying it. I like it. Right, again, this game is one of my favorite games of all time, so I'm gonna have some enjoyment off of it. But it does lead into the discussion and part of the controversy that's been happening this week with the release of this game. A few different things is one of them is the performance. So from my experience, so I'm playing it on the PlayStation 5 Pro, and I'm playing the game, and I'd already see Digital Foundry's take on it and all that, and when I saw that, I was like, ooh, dang, that sucks. But like I said, right, as long as it doesn't ruin the experience and all that, then I'll deal with it if it's a game that I like well enough to put up with it. And so I was playing the game, and at first I was like, okay, this actually seems pretty solid. I mean, it looks nice. Technically, it looks nice, right? I mean, the character models and all that looks nice and all that, and it was running at a 60 frames per second as far as to my eyes. But then I got up to the point where you're about to rescue Sokolov, and well, was it? No, no. So a little bit past that, actually. No, was it? Well, at least where I really noticed it. I mean, I was noticing some stutters. Don't get me wrong. I was noticing some stutters in certain areas, but it was the area where you save Sokolov. But this is actually where you meet Eva, and then you get ambushed. Well, there was a section that I was trying to, because again, I'm still trying to get used to the controls because I'm trying it in the new control style, and for the most part, I like it. But then I got alerted that some enemies were, that they spotted me. So I was trying to figure out the controls, like to try to, I don't know, try to strategize something. And I couldn't figure it out. And so then I got kind of backed up into a corner. All these enemies swarmed towards me. And I was like, oh, I was rotating the camera, trying to get out and all. And in that instance, the game just kind of moved at a really slow pace. And I was like, oh, okay, there's a performance issue and all that I've been hearing a lot about. So it definitely chugged at like, I don't know. I mean, it almost looked like 20 frames per second at one point. And I don't know, again, I don't know the actual numbers. I don't have like a way to test all that and all, but just to my eyes, I was like, okay, that's pretty bad. So all that to say is this. This is just sort of my take on it. Because it's not just an easy answer, right? So for someone like me who's a big fan of Metal Gear Solid 3, I love the game. I'm a big fan of like a lot of Hideo Kojima's older games and all. And so because in this game it's just pretty much like a one-on-one recreation of the game, outside of some gameplay tweaks and the graphics obviously and all, it pretty much is the same experience, right? And I love Metal Gear Solid 3 so much that I will be willing to pay extra to or pay down some money to experience this game in a new fresh coat of paint because I'm that geeky enough to it, right? Like I love that game so much, and all. For example, like there's just certain things that I just absolutely love, right? And I'm going to continue to buy it. I'm just because I'm just a fan of it. For example, Blade Runner. It's one of my favorite all-time movies of all, or favorite movies of all time. Every time they've released like a new version of it, I end up buying it. Like when they came out with the Blu-ray version of it, then the Blu-ray extended cut version, right, and then the 4K version, and then on streaming and all that, because I'm just such a huge fan of that, right? That's my feelings towards Metal Gear Solid 3. I'm such a big fan of it and all that I'm gonna plunk down the money for it. But it does lead into a discussion though, and kind of the same thing also with Metal Gear, or I'm sorry, Gears of War Reloaded, is are these remakes slash remasters, are they really necessary if you're not really changing much? Because, and the reason I say that is because like Gears of War, the Ultimate Edition, it exists. You can buy it on modern consoles, outside of, outside of it now being available on the PlayStation 5, but it was available on modern consoles. And Metal Gear Solid 3 is also available on modern consoles, the HD version, right? But which is based off of the PS2 version. So then if you're more or less doing the same thing, what is the point of these, right? And I understand that. I understand that argument and all because it's like what are we doing here, right? I mean, does a fresh coat of paint that it has on it, like with the new graphics and all, does it really change the the experience and all? And I kind of felt about Metal Gear Solid 3 the way I felt about, or I'm sorry, Metal Gear Solid Delta the way I felt about The Last of Us Part 1. Same thing with The Last of Us Part 1. I'm such a huge fan of that game and all that I was willing to pay for the extra version, right? The Part 1 version on the PS5. Because again, just I just love seeing it in a new, fresh light, right? With the new graphics and all, but it didn't really change anything else, really, just outside of a few minor enhancements. So then it's kind of like, what's the point, when the previous one already exists? And that is a good question, because I mean, it's like, could these resources have been put towards something different? Now, I'm sure there's a lot of marketing reasons for it and all. Like, I would think that Konami is probably trying to do this because they're trying to maybe eventually create their own Metal Gear game, and this is just sort of testing the grounds. But they don't really want to mess with the legacy of the game that the game had, especially because Hideo Kojima is not with them anymore. So I don't know that for sure. That's just my thought, but because the other thing too also is I'm playing the game, right? I'm enjoying it, right? I do enjoy it. I mean, I'll definitely, I'm having fun with it. But is it the best way to play Metal Gear Solid 3? Uh, you know, I I guess depends on where you're coming from, because if you're someone that is younger and you're more used to these modern graphics and all and certain gameplay controls, then yeah, probably it'd probably be the one, you might want to start off with. But something about the new graphics, aside from the performance, the new graphics, they do look nice, right? The character models and all that, they look nice. But it, Metal Gear Solid 3 was it's a bit um what's the word? Zany? It's a bit over the top. And sometimes the new graphics, it doesn't, I mean, because they look more real, which, they do. I mean, the character models look, not real, but more towards leaning towards photorealism. And like the environments and all that look great and all, but sometimes it seems a little off though when you're seeing more anime kind of in style cinematics right, with these kind of more newer graphics. It doesn't look bad or horrible or completely out of place, but there is a bit of like this weird disconnect that I didn't really have with the original one. And the other thing too also is that sometimes what happens when they redo these games, because it was kind of the same thing with Gears of War also with and comparing it to the 360 version. So, two examples that were brought to light, and I do agree with some of the stuff that some videos that I saw this week is two scenes. So, like, let's take for example Gears of War on the 360 where you go to that stage where there's you're entering like an abandoned warehouse, but there before you get to it there's like a bunch of rain falling down, and the effect that that gives, it made it look really atmospheric, kind of creepy and all that. When the one on the new one, well, even the ultimate edition back in 2015 and then this new one, yeah, I mean it's dark, it's rainy and all that, but it, maybe it looks more realistic, I guess, but it loses some of the tone of it though. And the same thing with Metal Gear Solid. So in Metal Gear Solid 3, the one on the PlayStation 2, there was sort of like a greenish kind of filter as you're playing the game and all that. I don't know, something about it just really lent itself well to the sort of jungle environment you're in. And in this one, everything looks more like the lighting and everything and all the texture qualities and all look more real, but it kind of loses some of that atmosphere. And I've seen this video also where they were talking about a particular scene at the end too, and I saw some screenshots of it. And I was like, "Oh, okay, that yeah, it kind of loses a bit of what they were trying to do back then." Because again, it's not just that the graphics are look real; it's also its art style and all. And sometimes these remasters or remakes, they kind of don't nail that aspect of it. And so then it kind of brings to the point, right? Again, right? It's like, why are we doing this, right? Especially if it's you know, a $70+ game, and especially if it also has performance issues. And so, again, it's just it might not bother some people, but just some things that I did kind of notice. And but at the end of the day, I'm still having fun with it. I don't regret my purchase, but just something as I guess a public service announcement, right? That you know some things do get lost in these remakes, remasters, and all that kind of makes it, it does beg the question of like why. But if you're not like a big fan of the games, right? Like, for example, like the way I am. But anyways, but like I said, I'm still having fun with it. I'm glad that PlayStation players are now finally playing Gears of War also. And so for that they're alone there, it's that's got to count for some good news. But okay, let's get into 1983. So the year of the video game crash. So as I started researching on this, there's a lot of information out there. I'm just going to try to provide as much information as I was able to come across, and then you kind of interpret it as how you will. And but I think there's a common theme that I started seeing though that seems to kind of ring true. Me being an adult now and all having some understanding of how the world works as far as what happened back then, because it was a lot of different factors. I kind of mentioned it last time, right? And all that. A lot of it is was attributed. The popular choice was that it was because of ET and Pac-Man and a bunch of bad games, which is part of that is true. It's just that there was a lot of other factors, right, and all that that were more of the main causes of it. So I'll try to break it down as much as I can. But I'll kind of leave that towards the end here. Is there was also some cool stuff though that happened in 1983 outside of the crash, and because when I say video game crash, it's not like the video game industry stopped as a whole. It's just that they took a big hit as far as financially. Um, so it's not like it just completely plundered and then rose from the ashes out of nowhere again, right? There was still like the arcade scene was still a thing, and all. And so it wasn't. I mean, it was a big deal. Don't get me wrong; it was a big deal especially as far as like video game companies and all that goes. But I don't think it was quite as detrimental as sometimes history makes it seem, right? Um, but did want to have one correction though from last time, because another thing that kind of gets blamed a little, or well, maybe not blamed, but just one thing that keeps coming up as far as when the crash happened and all, was a game from a dog food company. And I think last time I said Pedigree, well, it was Purina, and it was called like Chuck Wagon or something like that. But it was just a promotional game made from a company called ICOM Simulation. But yeah, it seems like it was just kind of more of a promotional game. So like I think if you buy their dog food, you get a game. So kind of think of it like the Burger King games that came out back in the day on the Xbox, the Sneak King, I believe they were called. So again, it was silly game and all, but not something that I think was um, affected the gaming industry to the point where it crashed. But let's see, just to go over some things here, and again, I'm just pulling this from Wikipedia, so I don't know completely how accurate some of this stuff is. But let's see. So 1983 has seen many sequels and prequels in video games such as Mario Brothers, Pole Position 2, but then also some new games like Astron Bell, Champion Baseball, Dragon's Lair, Elevator Action, Spy Hunter with its dun 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 something like that. And Track and Field. Let's see. So one of the main things again for major events was the video game crash of 1983. And the third generation, though, of video game consoles, beginning with the launch of the Nintendo's family computer, known as the Famicom, and the Sega SG-1000 in Japan. So I'll touch base a little bit on those later. The year's highest grossing video game was Namco's arcade game Pole Position, while the year's best-selling home console was Nintendo's Game & Watch for the third time since 1980. Let's see, so financial performance in the United States, arcade video game revenues are worth $2.9 billion, equivalent to $9.16 billion adjusted for inflation. In the United States, home video game sales are worth $2 billion, equivalent to $6.31 billion adjusted for inflation. In Japan, home video game sales approach 400 billion yen, equivalent to 1.6 billion at the time, or 5.88 billion adjusted for inflation. So let's see. So in Japan, Game Machine magazine began publishing half-monthly charts of top-grossing arcade games from June 1st of 1983, and so the following games were the top-grossing video game arcade games on the Game Machine charts from June to December of 1983. So let's see. So May, June, and July was Championship Baseball. August was Championship Baseball and Elevator Action. September and October was Elevator Action. And November was Xevious and Joshi Volleyball. And in December was Xerion and Hyper Olympic. Well, those are like for table arcade cabinets. And then for like upright cockpit cabinets, May through August was Astron Belt. September through October was few of them. It was Ultra Quiz, Astron Belt, Pole Position, and Star Wars. November was Laser Grid Pre and Pole Position 2, and in December was TX1. Let's see. In the United States, let's see. So this is according to Replay Magazine. Number 1 was Pole Position. Number 2 was Dragon's Lair and Mr. Do. And then, so that's from Replay, but then from another one called AMOA, so Amusement and Music Operators Association. So it looks like they had number 1 at Pole Position. And then number 2 to 3, it just has a bunch of games here, not really specified in any order, but like Bump and Jump, Galaga, Miss Pac-Man, Mr. Do, Bagman, Nibbler, Buck Rogers, Plant of Zoom, Jungle King, Donkey Kong, Joust, Time Pilot, and Cuber. Interesting. So for the best-selling home video games, so number 1 was Miss Pac-Man on the Atari 2600, Donkey Kong on the ColecoVision, Centipede on the Atari 2600, and actually every game from here on out past this will be all on the 2600. But number 4 is Pitfall, number 5 Pac-Man, number 6 Night Driver, number 7 Space Invaders, number 8 Warlords, number 9 Breakout, and number 10 Centipede. So, Pac-Man wasn't selling too bad either, right? And we're going to get into that here later. Best-selling home systems. So number 1 was the Game & Watch. Number 2 was the Atari 2600. Number 3 was the Commodore 64. Number 4 was the ColecoVision. Number 5 was the Famicom. Let's see. Number 6 was the IBM personal computer. Number 7, the Intellivision. Number 8, Atari 400 / Atari 800. Number 9, Apple II. And number 10, the NEC PC-88, PC-98. Game of the year, let's see. So there's a few different um, places that this is coming from. So like the 4th Arcade Awards, the Video Games Player Joystick Awards, and the Golden Joystick Awards. But let's see. So it looks like for Game of the Year, so they had pole position for the arcades. Console was Miss Pac-Man and Ladybug. Computer was Lode Runner. Standalone was Qbert. Arcade was Robotron 2084. Console was or sorry, that's no. So okay. So starting with Robotron 84. So this is for the Video Game Players Golden Stick Award, and then console was Pitfall, and then the computer was Seamus. Let's see. So okay, so just some statistics there, and so yeah. So starting off with some video games that came out this year. There was Elevator Action. I never played this one, but it looks like you get on an elevator, you go up and down, and you shoot enemies and all, and it seems to be kind of a fun game. There was Tapper, which I do like this game. It's originally when the game came out was it had the Budweiser logo on there, and you're a bartender, and you're just kind of going up and down as you have to keep serving beer to a bunch of different, angry customers. And as you throw a beer at them, what you basically do, you slide it down on the long table, right? And then as they get a beer, then they kind of move towards the back of the line, because they're happy for a moment. But then once their beer's done, then they start crawling, working their way back up the table. And basically, if you let all the customers get to the end of the table, then it's game over, I believe. And so you have to just really quickly, like, throw the, slide the beer glasses down, right, to keep your customers happy. Eventually, it got switched over to root beer, as from what I saw, it, basically kids were playing this game, and it was almost like advertising beer to kids. um, but it was a Jumpman on Commodore 64 on the computers. And so Jumpman, if you look at the game, it seems very kind of like a lot like Donkey Kong in a ways. And so it seems like it definitely took some inspiration from it as far as like the level design and all that. And the character is just kind of like a stick figure looking thing, but his name was Jumpman, which is what Mario was originally called in the original Donkey Kong game. So it seems like they took some inspiration from that. Again, a lot of games were sort of copying off of each other, back in those days. Um, but speaking of Donkey Kong, though, there was a Sega game, though, called Congo Bongo. And this game has kind of more of a three-fourths view, and the graphics are more detailed on it. It's actually a decent looking game for the time, but you're basically working your way up a terrain to eventually save a girl that's being held captive by a big gorilla. So, it's kind of Sega's answer to Donkey Kong, right? This might have been the start of the console wars from Sega Nintendo. Um, and there was also a really, I guess, back then it was fairly controversial. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre game, where you play the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I mean, back then it seems, I mean, the graphics look really primitive and crude on it and all, but you're basically going down killing people. So I can imagine that would have, because the cover art is of the game looks basically like the um of the movie, right? So I can imagine that would have been kind of controversial back then to some groups of people. And then we're also getting into where video games were starting to become a big deal, and so you're starting to see a lot of licensed properties. And so, for example, there was a game from the band Journey, and I don't know how good the game was and all. I mean, from what I've seen of screenshots and all, it looks a little silly, but it has like the digitized faces of the band members. But the fact though that it was based on a big property like or not property but a band like Journey, right? And I was starting to show the appeal of video games, all from whether if it was a pop culture sense or just also financial sense, right? But then also we had the Star Wars game, which I think this was the first Star Wars game. And I do remember this one, seeing it in the arcades, because I thought it really looked really cool because the sort of like the wheel thing that it has on the cabinet looked really cool, and then also because they made it look like a TIE fighter, if I remember right. And then the graphics, I mean, it's basically like are these like, I think, vector graphics? I'm not sure, but it's like these. It's like it's just like lines, right? But it made for where it could do some pretty cool 3D effects. And so, for example, like if you're going down the tunnel or whatever, right, and all to get to the where you can shoot your bombs to blow up the Death Star and all that. That was pretty amazing back then. And from what I recall, the sound effects were really good too as well. Because I remember hearing the sound effects coming from the arcade, and I just thought it just always looked cool. I never played it back then in the arcade. I will get to this more as the years go on, but I was always intimidated to play arcade games at first, and that was one that I just like seeing it from a distance. But yeah, I mean, we were starting to see a lot of cool, games that were being from licensed properties. I talked last year about Tron and all, right? Now we're up to Star Wars. And on that note, also, we started seeing the animated Laserdisc games too from Don Bluth. Um, so he's I don't know his whole history. I just know that he's involved in a lot of cool animation from back in the 70s and 80s, I believe. And so, for example, like things like I believe like The Secret of Nim and oh, there's a bunch of other ones I forgot from back in that time. But he did this Dragon Slayer game, which has his signature sort of art style and animation, which looks really, really cool. And so this basically with Dragon Slayer, it's I mean, I guess it is a video game, but it's basically a cartoon that you're every now and then you'll get a prompt on the screen to, move in a certain direction or push a certain button, and then, the video will play out the intended animation for it. So that's all it's really just like a quick time event, right? That's basically what the whole game is. But the cartoon that you watch and all the animation and everything was really cool. So I just thought that they were very high tech, very revolutionary for back in the day. And I used to love watching my brother play them actually, because again, I was too intimidated to play it, but I just used to love watching, just, someone play the game. And they were quarter munchers though, because again, the games are very hard. You have to be very precise with your timing, as you're trying to get through these quick time events. But yeah, Dragon's Lair, it's a classic for sure, and I love playing it every so often. Right? I don't know, just because again, I just love looking at the animation on it. Um, and there was also Track and Field is one that I remember in the arcade a lot because it just had buttons. And I just remember I used to like eventually when I got comfortable with playing arcade games, I used to like just playing a game or two and all just because I like mashing on the buttons. I don't think I've ever really won a race in it, but basically it's just like a side-scrolling game where you're just tapping on some buttons to make your racer race faster, and the harder you press the buttons or the faster you press the buttons, the faster he'll run. And it's kind of hard though, because I mean you're just pounding on those buttons and all. It's pretty simplistic and all, but I just remember having fun in the arcades, for that there, because it was like the one game that I felt like it was one of the more first arcade games that I played, just because again it was like, okay, I can do this, I can push buttons. um and then there was also Ultima 3, which I don't know a whole lot about this game. Looks like it's like a top-down RPG, but continuing on with the Ultima series. But it looks like it was pretty popular back then and eventually kind of kept laying the groundwork, right, for what would become RPGs that we know 'em, nowadays. And so, again, we had already had Ultima 1 and 2, but this one, from what I saw, it seemed like this one was one that was becoming really popular and probably really started laying the foundation, right, for a lot of other developers to start picking up where the series was, leaving off at. Um, but then just kind of some things here as far as like things that came out and all, and it's just certain, more news related stuff. So one thing that was coming out this year was there was actually some advertisement, like a commercial, and also on ads and magazines and all, was an attempt to prevent piracy of video games. As from what I was seeing, it looked like, and I think this is kind of more on the PC side of gaming, because PC gaming at the time was kind of a big deal. I mean, there was Commodore 64, and I'm sure some other ones that they were starting to find their niche audience too as well. And but it seemed like the games were very easy to pirate and on to put them on floppy disks, and so they would give examples of like going in, back then, right? For people that were involved in gaming, where they would just have like stacks of floppy disks of just pirated games. So however it was being done, it just seems like it was pretty easy to do. So that was interesting, right? And all the, we were dealing with that back then. But hey, we're still dealing with it now, and sometimes you got to. But let's see. Now I say that in the cases where the publisher won't release the game for retail sale, right? Don't be pirating games that aren't you. Um, let's see. And so the Famicom. So I mentioned, right, that the Nintendo Famicom comes out in Japan, which is short for Family Computer. And the system looks very different from what it looks like, what eventually the Nintendo Entertainment System that came out here looked. Same pretty much system, but very different looking. It has kind of like a weird beige color with a sort of like a maroon sort of outlining on the outside. The controllers were hardwired to the system, I think, towards the back, and the controllers looked, I mean, kind of the same shape, but looked pretty much different. I mean, more the color scheme of the system, right, with kind of a beige and maroon sort of color. And I think it said Family Computer on the front, but it's basically the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it came out in 1983. So, again, the video game crash is it. I mean, it definitely affected more in the United States, but because again, in Japan, things were looking okay as far as I understand, and in other parts of the world, like because I think in Europe, I think it was the PC gaming scene that was really big. I think I saw that one time. I'm not sure. But yeah, this was the start with the Nintendo Entertainment System. Well, the Famicom, right, as it was known there, started coming out. And lesser known, though, is that the Sega SG-1000 also came out on the same day. So Sega and Nintendo's rivalry kind of started here. But back then, it wasn't what eventually it became, right? The Sega, they were starting to make a bit of a name for themselves in the arcades. And so this system here, from what I understand, it just seemed like it failed as it just didn't have a lot of support. And, the controller, it was kind of more like because the Famicom, it had like the gamepad with a directional button or the directional pad and then the two buttons, where the SG-1000, it had still kind of more reminiscent to like the second generation system where it had like a joystick and then some buttons, but it kind of looked almost like a remote shape kind of thing, and so still kind of more in the style of the second generation. So I think a part of that would just, it felt probably more like a second generation kind of inspired system, where the Famicom looks like it was really trying to do something different. So that's my thought probably on why it failed. And again, I probably just didn't have that much support. But we also had the MSX computer that came out, and so again, this was in Japan. Seems like there wasn't a whole lot of understanding as far as how it got its name, and a lot of the games that came out for it were games that were on the Nintendo or had a similar style, like for example Castlevania and Metal Gear. So that's what I know the MSX for mainly, is for it being the original place where Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 came out, the original ones, from back in the day. But yeah, but looks like they came out in Japan, and from what it seems like, it had a bit of a following. There was also a video game show called Starcade, and so it looks like it was based on I guess the contestants playing arcade games, and they would compete against each other, I guess, to get like the high score and all. But what was interesting about it, though, what I saw, and I'm actually curious to check out a few episodes, I'm sure maybe they're on YouTube somewhere, but is that it looks like it was from various different groups of people, right? From young, old, male, female, and all. And so again, it kind of starting to allude that gaming was starting to become more mainstream. And so, from what I saw, Alex Trebek, from Jeopardy, he was on the host for the pilot episode, and then eventually but then it was Mark Richards who was on the first season, but then looks like afterwards he was replaced by Jeff Edwards, who seems like he was the more beloved host, and I guess sounds like he hosted the show more, and afterwards. And it just sounds like he was just kind of more the one that was better suited for the show, because it sounds like he wasn't really a gamer, but he was a good host though. And looks like he sadly passed away though. Looks like in 2014 though. Okay, so oh, and also I didn't know this, but I just saw it fairly recently that there was. I love the movie Cruel. It's an old '80s sci-fi fantasy movie, and it's it hasn't aged that well and all, but I still think it's a good watch though for just for nostalgia's sake. It's one of the first roles of Liam Neeson actually too, but it's a fantasy movie where basically the main character, he's trying to save a princess, I think, and there's like this cool monster at the end, and but the one thing that stands out about it though is his weapon, which is sort of like it's like a big old like star-shaped blade almost, and the way he throws it and it comes back to him like a boomerang and all. I just love the movie back then. I didn't know they made a video game about it though. And I saw a little bit of gameplay footage of it earlier today, actually, as I was just kind of finishing up some notes on this. And it doesn't seem that good though. But that was kind of cool though that they made a video game of that. But all right, so let's get to the big thing here of 1983, and that's the video game crash. So, again, some of the things I just kind of jotted down right and all. I'm just going to try to give like an overall perspective of just a bunch of different information that I saw on this and all. And then because again, it seemed like there was a lot of different contributing factors, but there's a few things though that kind of seem to be the more major things of what happened though. And so, but I did hear this thing though, where it looks like, I mean, it almost happened like very quickly. Because I saw this thing where it said, I think Atari, was it just Atari or in the video game industry as a whole? But it basically like I saw something about like 6,000 people had lost their jobs almost overnight. And so basically, so kind of going back here, I found some slides here on the internet and all, and so towards the end of 1982 is where things, looks like investors and publishers and all were starting to get a little nervous, and so looks like on an earnings call from Warner Communications in December 7th, because I think they had gotten themselves involved with Atari or something, and I saw something like one of the owners of Atari and all, like he cashed in some stock and all, and because then Atari was going to lose big money, so they were all projecting, right, and all the things were going to start going south. So like one thing that I saw here, it said the projected revenue increase for their subsidiary Atari was 15% from 1981, much lower than their previous estimate of 50% earlier in the year. So because of the lower revenue projections, it triggered the investors started panicking, and shareholders were quickly dumping all of their video game stocks because I think they just saw the writing on the wall. They're like, "Oh, okay, this is gonna fail." And so why did that happen though? Um, so video games, even back then, right, and gaming systems were very expensive, and so with no investors to secure funds to make the video game hardware and software, it becomes more difficult and almost impossible for most companies. And so it was, so again, they started losing a lot of money on games, and so then a lot of investors were just, like I said, right, dumping their stocks and all. And but why was that happening though, right? Again, because that was so always what I was curious about. I was like, is it just that there was a bunch of bad games? And it kind of seems like, I mean, yeah, I mean, there seems like the market was getting flooded with a lot of bad games and all, and also a lot of consoles. I mean, there was a ColecoVision, there was an Intellivision, there was the Atari 2600, the Atari 5200, the Vectrex and all, and then a lot of the PC games that were out there. So there was a whole bunch of games out there and all. And again, the gaming culture, I don't think it was back then as what it is now. And so I think a lot of people were just a little overwhelmed with a lot of different options and all. But one of the main things, though, that I kept starting to see afterwards, though, as far as a big part of this, though, was as far as like why it ended up crashing, was it was also had to do a lot, apparently, with some of the more popular games actually that were actually selling okay. So like ET sold okay initially, Pac-Man sold okay, excuse me, on the Atari 3600. But what it was is, so just kind of going here on some things here that I had seen online, but um, so game publishers had to accept all unsold game copies from retailers, assuming all the financial risks. Retailers could not return these unsold games to bankrupt companies. So this created a glut, which was starting to known as the retail glut in the market. Retailers had to drastically mark down prices to clear the inventory. And so companies that were some of the main companies that were part of this was JCPenney and Sears, it looks like. So, kind of when I was watching this video, the way the dude was explaining it on there was that uh, they would order a lot of games, and but they weren't. I mean, they would sell okay, but it looks like they ordered a lot of games, so a lot of games were being developed, and so because they couldn't return those unsold games to the bankrupt companies, so like companies like JCPenney or Sears, because again these companies were starting to go bankrupt and all, it just created like this big old just bunch of like games that were out there. And from what one thing that I kept seeing a lot, and they were showing like news footage of it, is that there was just bins of like just cheap games for like $1 or $5 or whatever, and all because they were just they were just producing a whole bunch of it, which probably explains why some of them might have been dumped out into that landfill that I believe I mentioned last episode. And so I think just because of that, it was just ultimately it just seemed like it was really bad the way that games were being distributed, and that there wasn't really some quality control, or maybe not necessarily quality control, but as far as like control over like how much to order and all that, and keeping your inventory in check and all, and so you're producing more than what you can sell, and so that seemed to be kind of the more big part of why the whole why the not the whole industry, right, but why there was that big video game crash here in the United States. And the thing is that back then, a lot of people probably didn't even notice, because if anything, it was kind of good to the consumer, because you're walking around and you see a bin of like a bunch of $1 to $5 games. I don't know what they might have cost originally back then, maybe $50. I don't know. But it's like, oh, sweet. I can pick up a whole bunch of games for cheap. But it was obviously very detrimental to a lot of video game companies. Atari taking a big hit, obviously, right? I know, because they never recovered after that. And so it just seems like there was just a lot of bad business decisions that were being done on that end there, as far as the distribution of video games and all, and that the games just couldn't be sold back. And so I think that a lot of people just kind of saw like, okay, yeah, this is not working out. We're jumping ship, basically. A lot of investors and shareholders, and assuming that the video game um industry, it was just going to be a fad, right? Like it wasn't something that was going to last. It was like, okay, we had a good run, let's just cut our losses and move on from here. More or less my understanding of what happened. But you factor in also, right, some bad games and all that, and they I mean, I don't know how bad the reputation of Pac-Man and ET was back then, because it seems like, I mean, they weren't the best games, because like I played the Pac-Man port on and it is pretty bad. I played the ET game, and I mean, it's not something I would really get into now, but at the time, again, the expectations of the time back then were different also. And the other thing too, also what I read about ET, which makes sense because I know this of a lot of games, even when I was growing up, is that a lot of the experience was also reading the instruction manual, because they would have a lot of what you're supposed to do in there, right? Where nowadays a lot of the tutorials and all that are in the game. Back then you would have to refer to the manual. So it seems like games like those, and probably several others, were, they weren't maybe necessarily horrible, at least like the games that are blamed for the crash. It's just that they were kind of within line of the expectation of what it was back then. And again, it just seems more that the way these games were being distributed, that there was just way too many being sold, or to retailers, but not being sold to the public and all. Uh, it seemed like that was just kind of the big deal about it. Because I think I saw something where so many copies were made of ET and Pac-Man, just to give those two as an example. And they sold decently. I mean, like I said, they were on the top 10 list, right? But there just wasn't enough there was just too much though that was being made. Like, you can only sell so much. Um, but it seems like more or less that's kind of what happened. But again, right, that was here mainly in the United States. It didn't seem to really affect Japan and Europe, at least initially. But I do feel though that what ended up happening afterwards with the Famicom, that it was a big deal in a sense though, because even though it wasn't affecting other parts of the world, but eventually that the Nintendo made it big here in the United States, in a way, you could almost say like brought gaming back into the mainstream, because even though it did, the United States, for better or worse, it is the biggest market, and so you definitely want to appeal to the American audiences, because unfortunately, with if the European market was thriving and the Japanese market was thriving, but if the United States market wasn't, that's a huge chunk still, and so I just kind of wonder like if. eventually Nintendo not coming in and being as popular as it ended up becoming in the United States, what gaming would have been like? Would it been kind of like more of a niche thing, in certain regions of the world? I don't know, right? That's just speculation based on really just nothing really. But I'm just kind of curious though. But yeah, that's what happened there. But there were still arcade games that were coming out, although a lot of arcade places though were closing though. I think I saw that as well too. So it did take a hit, but it didn't completely fall apart and then rise out of the ashes later, right? It's sort of like was a bit on life support and all, but still hanging in there, and then eventually came back to life right here in the next few years, which I'm sure we'll learn more about in the next few episodes. But yeah, but that's what I got here for today's episode. So yeah, so this one clocked in a little bit longer. I figured it would since I had a little bit more to say today. And I will try to see if I can again play those games that I mentioned earlier today. So what was it? RoboCop, Rogue City, and Pikmin 4, but I might have to settle for Pikmin and Golden Sun also. But yeah, with that said, though, hope you have an amazing day, and I will talk to you in the next later.